Hello, everyone. We're back after what is an unintentionally long break. Life happened. I've been busy. Elliott's been busy. I believe Elliott, the last time you were on was to talk about your I guess you could say your spheres of people, your Earth people,
The
your
moon
moon people,
people.
your sun people, and your star people. Which is a great episode. Everyone should check it out. I have been bumping that as much as I can, IRL and online, so people should check it out. It's gotten
Such a
some
kooky
positive reviews.
episode.
It's
Oh,
gotten positive
really?
reviews. Yeah, yeah, it's got people
Oh,
like
that's cool. What do people think?
just that they're like, oh, that's cool. I like the way that, I mean, it wasn't like it. I think it
Yeah,
was
yeah,
from
yeah.
largely people who hadn't thought too much about it. So it was
Well, I
just,
bet not.
well, I mean, I never thought about it until we had you on. So we'll have to have you back on for a specific follow-up episode if you have time. But today,
Sure, sure.
now for something completely different, as is my prerogative on the channel here. And I mean, we have gone way down a number of episodes that we're doing, but I just try to go for quality over quantity at this point. Um,
Hmm.
Talking about one of my favorite short stories from one of my favorite all-time authors of all time, Rudyard Kipling, "The Man Who Would Be King." This is one of my favorite short stories. It has been ever since, actually. So I was one of those people, very much a millennial. I watched the movie first, the 1975 film, which is an outstanding film. I highly recommend everyone watch the film. We're going to talk mostly about the themes of the story. The film itself is so similar to the act they barely changed. They actually had to add some things in. So they actually expanded some things in the movie. But the story itself is a fascinating adventure tale, and I love adventure tales. It's Kipling, who was born in India, raised in India, knew India like the back of his hand. Really, actually, kind of loved India. It's really, people don't like hearing that some Brits actually loved India, but many of them actually did love India. Whether India loved them is a whole other thing, but Kipling was very much in love with where he was from. He was British, but he's really from India. Um, the story, so I experienced it the first time watching the movie and was like blown away by, like, oh, I think it was actually one of the first places I learned about what the Masons supposedly kind of, I got some inklings of what the Masons were, was actually
Hmm.
from this movie. And the
Oh,
movie, Elliot, I don't think you've watched the movie, but the movie,
no.
because the movie is a visual story, it
Yep.
really hits you over the head with um more like overt Masonic imagery. In the book, it's more suggested in certain places. It's a little bit more like
It,
hidden,
it, if
which makes
you're
sense.
if you're
Yeah,
not a Mason, right? There's, I mean, look, the Masonic references are not super deep, right?
yeah,
And they're not like hinting, winking.
no,
There's not like any crazy symbolism or whatever. But like the Masonic references would easily just kind of go over somebody's head. So if you are a Mason, you're like, oh, I know exactly what's going on, right?
yeah.
And you don't
Where,
really need, you've already got the visual baked in, right? But
whereas in the film, they really kind of
yes,
hit you with it, which is works, right? It works. It has,
yes,
you need that for the film.
yeah.
Everyone go watch the film. It's such a wonderful adventure story. It's so good. I love that film. If you're a fan at all of anything like Lawrence of Arabia, any of those type of movies, Anglos abroad doing shit, it's one of those Anglos abroad doing shit films. Anglos abroad doing shit and it goes bad. That's kind of like, yeah, like it's very much one of these films. The story is very much like that too. It's interesting. So this is well, it's a story. We're focusing on the story that we read. That I've
Mhm.
wanted to have Elliot on for a while to talk about because of the Masonic component.
Yeah.
But this was there's an idea I had for a couple years, but it was restarted in my brain. So I'll do a truly shameless shout out to a friend of the show, Pause, and Bird of
Mm,
Timeline
mm.
Earth. They're doing this epic watch through of Bill Cooper's Hour of the Time, 40 episodes of content thing. Um, Cooper, God bless him, didn't deserve the way he to die the way he did, but like is fixated on Masons in an interesting way. I don't think he has a very accurate take on Masons. And so this story was brought back up in my mind upon listening to one of Pause and Bird's recent episodes. And so I thought, why not bring on Elliot, who knows a lot more about this than I do, force Elliot to read Kipling because honestly, Elliot deserves to be more literary and lettered, and Kipling is one of the greatest authors that the English language ever produced, to be honest. And have
And
him
he
on.
was a joy to listen to for sure.
Have
Like, you
you?
know,
So I'm just
Yeah.
curious. This is my teacher hat. I'll put it on just for a little
Mm.
bit.
No,
Had
go
you
ahead.
ever read any Kipling before?
No. And
Jungle
it's gonna
Book? No?
well, so it's gonna sound completely out of left field, but the closest story to this story I have is actually Pearl's Buck, A Good Earth, right? Which is the kind of, well, not similar. She was actually like Chinese, right? Or I can't remember if it was the Anglo who went into China and went Sinophile, right? And then wrote like in kind of the style, but it's sort of the life and death of a you know uh you know Chinese mud farmer, so to speak,
Okay,
in
yeah.
in the pre-revolutionary era, and he's crushing it. Goes through a hard life, but great life. Extremely successful by the end of his life, and the end of the book ends with a CCP train trugging into the village. Right.
Oh dear, yeah. Yeah.
So,
This has a similar I have not read that story, but this has a very similar kind of
mhm,
tragic, fated quality to it. Yeah, I highly recommend to you, Elliot, and to everyone else listening, read Kipling. I haven't read everything he wrote, but I will
mhm.
say that I mean Jungle Book, great.
Oh,
Kim
sure.
is amazing. I highly recommend Kim. Kim is a very good book. Kim is a joy to read. Um, his short stories are also awesome. I think he kind of excels in both short and long format writing. This story, The Man Who Would Be King, is somewhere in between. I guess it's technically a novella. It comes across as kind of as like a long short story. Um, Essentially the setup is it's sort of one of these I heard tell kind of story within story, wonderful sort of Russian doll nested stories, things. You get a British journalist living in British India, so you can tell that they always say write what you know. So
Yeah.
Kipling is writing what he knows. Um, has it's during the hot season, and he's like, this is god awful, well, not necessarily god awful, but it's bloody hot. It's northern India. I'm assuming, I don't know exactly where the border would have been drawn. That might, well, and who knows, that might
Oh,
pop off in a few minutes. We don't know.
well, I
So
assume it's like Kashmir,
yeah,
right?
it's actually at that contested area. Yeah, so that all used to be the British Raj. And so British journalist, who is like, there's nothing going on, right? There's no stories to recount. He's not getting any telegraph interesting tidbits from around the world, so they're kind of like inventing stories, right? And then he has a story like literally fall into his lap, which is a fun kind of cheeky way of starting the story. You have these two, like, I guess you'd say vagabonds, but I think of them more as like scoundrel, like lovable scoundrels fall into his lap. They have this preposterous idea to go and like they're going to become kings, right? They've seen, there's Dravitt and Carnahan. They've seen enough of India. They have like gotten out of like close encounters kind of with like, assassins from various minor nobility. They've sort of tussled with some kings trying to extort money, and like it's all sort of implied that they're like involved in less than reputable um let's say endeavors, and they're like
And
they've
they have like some vague military training as well, right? Like
yeah, I
they're
mean, this was a
ex.
time where if you were, well, so it's interesting at the time when this is set. So I want to say, let me just double check the publication date here. Yeah, late 1800s, so 1880s. At this time, there was sort of earlier in British colonial history in India, which I'm not a super big expert on, but I've dabbled just a little bit. It was kind of a time where if you were a good enough military man and you were lucky, you could kind of just have like a successful career in India, because you could just go kick the shit out of people and the British would be like, yeah, go keep going, keep doing that, keep kicking more shit out of people because we want to take this area. And you could do it, and you could be quite successful as the train system. Really, at this point, train system is like the British gave India trains. Yes, they gave them trains. Uh, you're welcome. I'm not even British, but you're welcome. The train system, they gave them that. They had essentially conquered a lot of it at this point. So these intrepid, really kind of frontiersmen is what they um, are running out of things to conquer, right? And so they're kind of they're been. My impression is they've been reduced to kind of like minor intrigues and extortion racket type stuff. Um, I do like that Kipling pointed out that there was actually still, like, even when the British had control of India, there was still a lot of like murder, like political murder happening, because you had the former kings of whatever regions would be like subservient to the British, but would be allowed to rule under British like supervision essentially. But the British kind of just let them do what they wanted to a certain extent, right? And so there was like, yeah, I mean, the people are getting that stuff you see in like Temple of Doom. Yeah, I mean, like it's played up in the film, but that was kind of like what it was, because let's all remember again, as these two countries are about ready to explode each other, Pakistan and India are modern creations. They're British
Yeah.
creations. They never
Yep.
existed in
Yep.
any real way before. This will get us to good thing we're not monetized. They never existed before the British, right? So whether you like British involvement or not, that's just a fact.
I mean, you could argue that like there have been Indian empires, right?
Yes, there's
But
like the
up
Mughal Empire for sure. There were
right.
empires,
But
but
it's
they were
sort of
not
like
like a
trying to it's like trying
nation.
to pretend like yeah, it's like
Yeah,
trying to pretend all of North Africa and the Levant and Italy and Spain is
and
somehow
Germany.
metaphysically a
Yeah,
nation, and Germany and Gaul, as opposed to, I mean, Italy is even kind of fake,
Italy
and
is was
so is
never really
France and
I mean, well,
Germany.
under the Romans, okay, under the
Yeah,
Romans.
under the Romans, sure, but this is the
Yeah,
exact parallel, right? Is that
right.
sure, there's been Indian empires here and there, but
Yeah,
like, what are the fundamental units of the peoples? Like, again, even India and Germany is kind of fake, right? Like, those are
yeah. I
modernist
mean,
inventions, just like India is. So,
just like India. Yeah. So,
yeah,
which is not to actually to rag on India. Actually, it's just a statement of like historical fact. Like these are. I mean, I'll call out some. So okay, fine to be fair, right? Philippines, same thing. So I got family in the
okay,
Philippines. The
okay,
Philippines was never a country until the Spanish arrived. It was
interesting,
never a thing. It was
makes sense.
it was never a thing, right?
It's
There
a bunch
were
of islands, right? Like,
regional empire. There were regional kingdoms and empires, but it was only the external colonizing force, Spanish initially, right? That solidifies the Philippines as a quote unquote thing. Then the Americans take it, then we give it up to the Filipinos. I will refrain from having a long diatribe about our decision to do that post World War II. In any
well,
case,
well, and kind of my kind of capstone point on that is everybody pretends like America is a country, but it is actually an empire. And I'm just saying, even
we're
on
an
the
empire.
continent of America, right? We're
Yeah, we're an
several
empire.
countries
Yeah,
pretending to be
we're
a
an
country,
empire.
but we're actually an
No, we're
empire.
totally an empire. We should just own it. But yeah, here we go. Here we go
Yeah,
again,
yeah.
Elliot. I'm a big fan of Teddy Roosevelt. We should just own it. But yeah,
I
in
don't
any
think
case,
it's I don't feel either way necessarily, but I'm an anarchist and everything. But I'm just saying we're an empire, right? We
we're
don't
an
even have
empire.
to. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's just how it is. Like,
it's just how it is. So in this sort of and again, this is in the 1880s. It was difficult. I mean, and Dravitt and Carnahan talk about this, right? That India's become too small for men of their aspirations. They must go onwards. So they come into this journalist's office and are like, we need to see maps. This is, we need to see documentation about the land called Kafiristan, which just means like land of the heathen, really is what it means. Like the Muslims consider them heathens, the Hindus consider them like not definitely not them. It's a completely separate part of the let's say broadly Hindu Kush area, but it's basically like the hinterlands of what is probably now Afghanistan, something like that. So the people in this region, Kafiristan, are not even Muslim. They have like however many different idols they have, and that like and Dravitt and Carnahan say that we'll become the new idols, right? We will become the new kings of this land. So years go past, they leave, years go past, and then all of us, and then somebody shows up at the door, right? And I believe it's Pinky, right? Pinky survives. Rather,
as
no,
opposed to
sorry,
the
not
brain.
Pinky. No, no, no. So yeah, it's Peachy, right? Right,
Yeah,
Peachy
peachy.
survives.
Yeah,
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 Peachy
yeah.
survives, not Pinky. I'm thinking of Pinky and the
Sorry,
Brain.
I thought you were thinking Pinky and the Brain, and in this
Yeah,
case,
no, no.
yes, the Pinky
Peachy,
did survive. The
yeah,
Brain did
Peachy
not
Carnahan
survive.
survives, but he barely survives. So he's like
Yes, yes.
crucified and almost killed, somehow manages to survive and somehow manages to find his way back to this same sort of like the story ends where it begins. And he's like just a husk of a man, right, at this point. And he recounts this then tale of their taking of they have some success and then they have some definite downsides or some definite failures that they experience. People read the story, right? Like this is we'll talk about elements of the story, but what ultimately this is what I wanted to bring Elliot on for was to really talk about the Masonic quality of this entire story. So Kipling was a Mason, and I mean, to me, I'm not a Mason, so whatever. The way I read this, and upon rereading it for preparation a few days ago, I was struck by how I think I know more about Masons now than when I had seen the movie, and definitely when I read it the first
Probably,
time.
yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I'm seeing more of it, right? Like the
Yeah.
initial greeting and all of this stuff, and like, why are they getting help from this rando journalist? Why is any of this happening? And then the stuff that the intrepid British adventurers experience in Kafiristan, they find sort of like mystic ancient connections to Masonic lore. I will say that I mean, I think that that comes through as a non-Mason reading this, but I
Yeah.
really don't get, I'm probably only getting the surface. So Elliot, I guess if it's you're okay with this, I'll pass
I'm down.
the
Yeah.
talkie stick to you. And like, so I guess what are some initial reactions, or just jump in wherever you want? Like, let's just talk about it because it is interesting. Like the idea that the Masons might have like an ancient Eastern connection is that's part of like Masonic legend, right?
Well, okay. Yeah. I gotta
Or
actually.
is that an invention? Is that an invention on Kipling's part, just for a fun story? I don't know.
Well, so actually, okay. This is really interesting. So this will be good. Um, you know, you know what? I'll address that point here in a second. I
Okay,
wanted
you
to
do how
say
take it how
that
you will. Yeah.
just like because that is an interesting point, and it comes up kind of naturally in a little bit later, right? But essentially, like initially, I was combing through it because I was like, oh, Masonic connections. It's going to be like maybe there's going to be some dropped breadcrumbs here and there, right? And at some point, it's like, oh no, this is extremely very clear. But initially, there's a couple of things I point out where the guys, the two guys were like on the square, right? Which is an extremely clear Masonic illusion. And then they're like, hey, give
It's like a leveling square, right?
it's think about like leveling square is a little bit I guess from a Masonic nomenclature a little bit weird, right? Because the level would be the, it's got the plumb line in the middle and it's like, just a bubble level. You can think about it like that, just the old school version.
But it is for
This
it's for like setting a foundation, right? Like flat. Like
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Think about a
yeah.
carpenter square, right?
Okay,
Like
yeah,
that's the
yeah.
closest, thing that we've got. Obviously stonemasons would also have squares, but for us, we think about it more carpenter square type thing. You're
Okay,
you're basically making right angles is the
okay,
idea, right?
yeah.
And by the way, this is also if you've heard military people say squared away, right? It's not explicitly Masonic per se, but that's what they mean, right? Is that, we're at right angles. We are squared,
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I
Yeah,
never thought
yeah,
about
right.
that. I was raised by a military man, but I guess I didn't serve, so I just never really thought about that. It was just something that I heard growing up. Squared away was just a thing, and I just grasped it as a child as, oh, it means like ready to go, but I never really thought about that. Yeah, that makes sense.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's also what we mean by justified, right? That's what
Oh
justification
yeah,
is.
like even in printing, like right or left justification on a page, like when you're I have
Yep,
some experience in the printing or the publishing
yep.
industry, just a tiny bit. So that makes sense. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like on a
And
page, how you're aligning text. Yeah.
and it gets pretty wild when you're like, wait a minute, hold on, Elliot, are you really telling me that like justification? I'm like, yes, like God is justifying us with respect to Himself, right? Like
Yeah,
we
yeah,
are
we're aligning.
justified
Well,
in
you're
the
aligning with the divine, right? Yeah, you're aligning
correct.
your life action. Yeah, yeah,
Yep,
with
yep.
yeah, 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 yeah.
So
Makes
so
sense.
so anyway, so that's kind of okay. So that's when he's like, oh yeah, on the square. It's a particular Masonic jargon thing, right? And it has roughly those meanings, right, so to speak, right?
Yeah,
And
what does he
then
say? Sorry, I'm pulling out some quotes here. From the east, said he, and I am hoping that you will give him the message on the square for the sake of my
yes,
mother as well
on
as
the
your own.
square.
Yeah,
Yep, yep,
yeah.
yep. That's the part where I was like, oh, okay, interesting, right? And from the east is relevant, right? In terms of like that was another like, oh, interesting, right? Because the sun rises in the east, sets in the west type of thing, right? So you're
Is that where that comes
orientated
from? Just like the lunar, like or rather solar action moving through the sky? Is that what that symbolizes? Like from the east
to the
or
west. Yeah,
to the
yeah.
west? Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Like
okay.
like that's the general vibe, so to speak, right?
Bill
Like
Cooper would hate that we're talking about this, but just keep going. He would
no,
already
I
be
know, I know.
exploding. Yeah, yeah.
He would be really well. Bill Cooper would think I'm a Satanist, but it is what it is at some point. But regardless, like
He would hate that we practice we participate in the liturgy on Sundays. He would hate a lot of things about both of us. So we would yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. If you're anti-liturgy, I don't know what to do for you, my man. But I,
yeah,
I appreciate it. I understand evangelicals, whatever.
yeah,
Bill Cooper's doing his thing. But
yeah.
okay. So that was the other thing, which was maybe less clear, right? Is that when the intrepid adventurers are leaving, right? They're like, hey, give us a token for your kindness, right? And so what does he give?
Yeah.
he gives a charm compass, right?
Yeah, I kind of just I heard that completely in the like the normie exoteric like, oh well, of course they'll want a compass, right? Like for orientating themselves like on through landscapes, right? I didn't read that as anything, but does that have a deeper meaning?
Well, so are you familiar with the navigational compass, right?
Yeah, like north,
Yep,
south,
yep.
east, west, yeah, 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 like
Well, no,
magnetic
no,
north.
not that compass. Like you take your little two pointed, right? And it's like a geometry compass. Think about it like that. You're like, it's got
Oh,
two points, and you're like, yes.
oh, that kind of compass. Okay, I totally, yeah. See, again, I'm like, oh yeah, you would need a compass to go to Kafiristan. That's how I read that. But yeah.
Well, and I thought that was very cheeky of him, right? Because everybody else would think, "Oh,
Oh, of
you've got
Kipling.
like a navigational compass, right, like
Yeah,
that."
yeah.
But every Mason who literally just heard, "Oh, on the square," and it's like, "Oh, give me a charm for your compass," and then he gives them a small compass. I'm thinking that's actually so the bottom part of the Mason symbol is the
Oh yeah.
square, and the top part is the compass, right? And
Right.
so, like, that's very like again, it's like it's sort of like a sneaky little red dot. It's like, okay, I'm assuming the rest of the book is going to be untangling this, and then he is like, and then I talked about opening lodge. I'm like, okay, this was going to be clear. Okay, fair enough. But
So I guess
like,
can I, if I can
yeah, go ahead,
interrupt
go ahead.
just a little
Yep,
bit,
yep,
do you think this is a broader, very teacher kind of question, but it is something that
yeah,
comes to my
yeah.
mind. I'm curious about what you think. Do you think that
Mhm.
how much is Kipling writing explicitly to Masons and how much is he just writing an adventure story? Because it feels like he's just doing both simultaneously.
Yeah, I think he's a little bit of both. Look, I think the lessons to Masons are exactly the same as to your average person, as long as you have a clear enough literary, like to a Mason, it's going to be extremely clear. To a literary person, it's going to be like, okay, I need to think through this a bit, but the themes are the same in both
Right.
cases, right?
Yeah.
And essentially okay, so to your initial question, right? Uh, because they show up, right, and they are surprised to be basically presented by a secret handshake, right?
Right.
And it's true that, and this is widely known, that Masons have a sequence of increasingly esoteric secret handshakes, right? um you know
I watched a Monty Python documentary about this. It looks very interesting. There's like a under the leg motion that
Monty Python's so great. I love those guys. It's like the Ministry of Silly Walks too, isn't
yeah,
it?
it's pretty
Right? Like,
much.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, the British, like, because the British, I mean, to be fair, right? The British did invent modern masonry. Now, certainly there was probably, I'm sure that some of the stuff is a holdover from ancient medieval guild masons, right?
Right.
But it's not clear what amount. Like, just literally in terms of history, we don't have good history. Everybody has mythology and legendarium, all of which is fun and interesting and worthwhile to engage in. But like in terms of proper history, we just don't have it, right? Like
Right.
all we know is that masonry, as we know today, started in 1770 or 1721, which is also a controversy among Stephen Masons. Like it's not clear which was the correct date, but whatever. Um, you know, people didn't write things down so well, and if you're trying to have a secret-ish society, it is what it is. But so anyway, so they're greeted with a secret handshake, and they make a big deal, right? Kipling makes a big deal about the edit apprentice handshake, right? Followed by the fellow craft handshake, and then he tests for the master mason handshake, and they fail, right?
Right.
And when he's like, "Oh, I tried the word," and he knew the word. So this is actually something that literally happened because Freemasonry spread across the British Empire sometimes faster than civilization did, right? And this
Well,
is
yeah,
the
because you would just get enough Masons in an area even before it was incorporated is the wrong term, but like officially recognized as a British possession, they would just have enough people there, like, yeah, we're doing Mason shit here. That's my understanding.
Yeah, exactly.
And then
Well,
would later have to be like officially recognized by
correct. Yeah, and
whichever lodge was like closest. Is that how it worked? I don't even know. Like,
well, like, okay, okay. This is see, I didn't know that Kipling was a Mason, and this is how I knew he was a Mason, right? Because after they go through the handshake stuff, which anybody could even at that time would have known enough about to go through that level of detail that he went through, right? So firstly, he didn't go into any detail, right? Which a Mason would not, right? By oath, right? And a non-Mason would go into gratuitous detail because they don't understand the nature of secrecy. You
Do
know
you
what I
want to
mean?
hear
And
something
mystery.
hilarious?
Go
This
ahead.
is
Go
this
ahead.
is a very Kipling way. So this is the way he entered Freemasonry. This is a quote.
Mm, mm.
I was secretary for some years of the lodge, which included brethren of at least four creeds. This is so Indian, the mixture
Yeah.
here. I was
Yeah.
entered sort of as an apprentice by a member from Brahmo Somaj, a Hindu, passed, meaning to the degree of fellowcraft, by a Mohammedan, and raised to the degree of master mason by an Englishman. Our Tyler was an Indian Jew. So
Yep. Yep.
so
It's very
he
classic
like
Freemasonry.
so it's very podgy podgy. Yeah, like
Yep.
very
Yep.
anyhow. I just think that's hilarious. Keep going.
Well, no,
Yeah.
and so think about, this is such a great example, right? So think about, like, say, a Lewis and Clark type people, and I do believe they were Masons actually. So so
Probably.
so
No, I mean probably the connection with Jefferson, yeah, is
well, and Jefferson is not
Jefferson was
confirmed.
just into weird shit, right? So like it
Yeah,
makes sense. Yeah.
we think he could have been a Mason, right? But he also hung out with a bunch of Masons too, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, but we don't have any like record that he was a Mason. Now we would be excited to claim him. So when I tell you that, like, we don't have records, we don't have records on Jefferson, right? Like,
Right.
um, so anyway, point being is that, like, okay. So here's the deal, right? Is that it's not crazy. What would happen is, and this is a famous Mason thing, is that there's like some sort of magic Masonic symbol of distress,
Right.
right? And there are legends, which are they true or not? I haven't bothered to look into it, but I assume that at least one of them has been true. Where you'd have a British dude who is like out in the middle of nowhere, beset on all sides by Indians,
Heathens.
right? Native
Yeah.
Americans, right?
Yeah.
And he's just as the Hail Mary, right?
Indians of both varieties, depending on which continent you were in. Yeah.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
as the Hail Mary, suck it, Catholics,
Yeah.
gives the Masonic distress signal, right? And the Indian chief comes up and says, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, we can't scalp this one. This one's our friend." Right, like, and there's other various like legendarium about literally every war about Mason gets in a rough patch, says
I,
distress,
I
and an
actually
officer
I
from the
actually
other
heard
side.
I actually heard a family legend of a friend in undergrad whose family fought, I want to say for the North during the Civil War, but with like
Hmm.
their suppose this is all legendary, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Supposedly,
yeah.
like his ancestor didn't burn down one farmhouse in the South because somebody flashed
Yep.
a gang sign. So
The gang side.
the
Yeah, the
gang
gang
sign,
side.
and they're
Yep,
like,
yep.
don't burn that one. Yeah,
Yep,
it's
yep,
very yeah. So
yep.
this
And
is
and it,
definitely so. If I can interpose,
go
uh,
ahead, go ahead.
as a folklorist, I would say this is what we call a trope, right? This is a
Yes,
trope within the
yes,
legendarium that if you
yes, yes.
the special symbol, you get preferential treatment. So yeah,
Correct.
definitely
And
a
so
trope. Yeah,
and so like, and this is a theme, not just, by the way, in ancient times in the 1800s. Like, this is a theme amongst Masons now, where you find Masons in just the weirdest places. You're like, wait, you're a brother? Like, what the heck? You know what I mean? And so, okay, how did I know that Kipling was a Mason, right? Or the author was? Because he had the exact same thought that I did when he learned that these guys were fellow crafts. Was like, oh, okay, we could open lodge, right? And then the next thing he thinks, the two guys that come in are like, ooh, but what jurisdiction would we open under? Do we have Grand Lodge approval to open right now? That's geek Freemasonry, right? I'm just like, you know what I mean? You want to know what it's like to be a Mason. It's like, ooh, is it Masonically legal to open up under no Grand Lodge? Right? Like,
right.
that's very, like,
Well, which is
because
spoiler, which is what the intrepid heroes try to do. Well, kind of do, I
what
guess.
they do.
They do. Yeah, they do it, and it causes massive problems. So yeah,
Well, well, and this is sort of part of the story, I think, right? Which is okay. So to kind of continue to plot along here. So essentially, that was really funny because it's like, oh, this guy's a freaking Freemason. If like literally nobody else would think, oh, do I have Masonic grand jurisdiction here? Like that's such a freaking nerd take, right? And it's
Right.
whatever because okay, here's the way that it worked, right? So you kind of asked the question about grand jurisdiction. Now's the time, right? So the way it works is that Freemasonry, much to the you really can't like you can't convince people of this, right? And maybe at the super high levels, I don't know, not high level, but like essentially, like freaking, uh, there is no unified anything in masonry. Let's be
Right.
friggin' very clear,
Well, and this is
right?
the
Like,
thing. I mean, I'm not trying to besmirch the memory of really what I
yeah,
think
go ahead.
was American patriot, but Bill Cooper does not understand that. Even as a
No,
non-Mason, it's clear you don't get the complexity of secret organizations, right? Like you just don't
yeah,
understand. They're not all
you
one
just
thing. Now,
they're not a monolith, right?
they
Like
might say they're one thing. Of course they're going to
right.
say
Yeah,
that,
we
but that
brand like we're one thing, but we're super not one thing,
yeah,
right? Like,
right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right. So here's the way it works, right? And I'm kind of scooping a little bit of a different thing, but maybe it's not perfect crossover, so it's fine. Like, so there's always a Masonic grand jurisdiction, which is Grand Lodge. And a Grand Lodge, I mean, it's set up exactly like the Anglican Church, fun fact, right? In that, like, there's an overseer, which is the Grand Lodge, right? And then there are individual lodges, right? And I draw the religious parallel not because it's actually religious per se, right? But rather to say that it's structured like an episcopacy in that sense,
Yeah.
right? Except
Well, if it's yeah.
think about every cathedral not as like rolling up to a national church, right? In many cases it does, so to speak, but actually it's like, what if every bishop had autocephalus, right? And that's essentially the structure. So like every grand master is sovereign in the sovereign grand jurisdiction. You see what I mean? So like in England, right? The Grand Lodge of England, that Grand Master is the Pope of Freemasonry in England, right? But in America, there are 50 Grand Lodges, right? One per state, and there is no national Grand Lodge. So essentially, what ends up happening is like, wait, how do you know if one dude's a Mason or not? Well, there's a peer to peer, right? More of a federation recognition structure. So technically speaking, right? And this happens all the freaking time, where like Alabama does something to irritate all the other Grand Lodges in the world. So all the other Grand Lodges say, we don't recognize you. We're diplomatically pulling relations. Screw you guys. Your dudes cannot visit our dudes, and our dudes are not allowed to visit your dudes, right? And so, bam, you're not recognized. And so after a while, like everybody, puts their untwists their panties and like, is dumb about things, stop being dumb about things or whatever. And then they get recognition again, right? But there's constellation of like grand lodges that do and don't recognize each other throughout the world for various political reasons, and sometimes good reasons, sometimes stupid reasons, but it just, it is what it is. So like the way it actually works, right, is that in principle, right, any old schmuck, especially in that area, could have just said, I am the Grand Master of Kyrgyzstan, right? This new
Kafiristan,
country.
yeah, which
Kafiristan,
actually
right?
I didn't know this, but I'm just looking up is still a region of Afghanistan. Kafiristan is still now it's a modern province of Afghanistan. Obviously, its borders are modern, but it still is actually a place. And it was actually apparently, I'll just fill this in because this is something that I find fascinating. It's traditionally populated by the Nuristanis, which I'm assuming were the natives, quote unquote, that their intrepid adventurers are encountering. The Nuristanis were known for like half-heartedly becoming Muslim, and even then not really doing it all that well. And there's actually fun little bits in Kipling's story that point to this. So there's just kind of
Hmm,
little
hmm,
bits here. For example, like in the spirit of or in the vein of, let's say, of opening up a lodge willy-nilly.
hmm.
Where do they say they're going to open it up? Well, we're going to repurpose the temple of Imbra. Well, Imbra is just it's sort of a, I guess, a different pronunciation of Imra, which was like the pre-Islamic creator deity of the
Oh,
people.
fun.
So that I don't think Kipling ever went to Kafiristan, but he definitely did. He kind of tried, right? He did the research, right? And this is before the internet, before like
Hmm.
he
Hmm.
clearly tried to set it in this place, which I think is laudable too. It's just as a somebody who appreciates good writing. Like he's actually, he could have come up with any random deity, right? But like he actually tried. And it's interesting that as they're as Trevitt and Carnahan are trying to are becoming, I guess, gods, right? Which is the danger of the story, right? Like don't become a god because you're not one. They're gonna create Masonic lodges for the natives, which
Hmm. Hmm.
I think is supposed to be funny. I think that's supposed to be funny.
No,
Maybe it's not
it is
intended to be
kind of
funny, but I view that as
hilarious.
funny.
No, no,
Like,
it's low key funny because the thing
yeah,
is that like, okay, so
but they're just going to repurpose the pagan temples and say, well, these are just Masonic temples now. They're just British Masonic temples. It's fine. It'll work out. Yeah, spoiler, it doesn't. But yeah, yeah,
no, no, yeah, okay, so it is really okay. So the grand jurisdiction actually it is in principle, or it would be in principle to like I'm starting my own Grand Lodge, screw you guys, right? But you'd have to get recognition from everybody else, right? And and again, the reason why I compare it to say the Anglican Communion, right, is that again, it's not a religious thing, but you're getting charters from the previous Grand Lodge. So actually, and this is kind of interesting, right? The Grand Lodge of Alaska, right, as an example, used to be under the Grand Lodge of Washington, right? So the Grand Lodge of Washington used to include the state of Washington and the territory of Alaska. And then when Alaska became a state, right, they were granted a charter of Grand Lodge, from Washington, and that's how that kind of works. So, like in principle, you could stand up a Grand Lodge in a place that didn't have one already, and then try to go lobby for recognition. Now, that's not what they did, right? And the
right.
other, there's some other interesting things, right? So he's like, okay, uh, they were all fellow crafts, but they weren't master masons, which is really, really relevant because it means that all these dudes are incapable of properly minting new master masons. So it's very interesting, right? Because the thematic part of the story is, and this is what's really critical, they don't just want to be kings, they want to produce a dynasty, right?
Right.
So they kind of set up the mimetic dynasty. The issue, right, is that they kind of give the natives the the ability to mint new master masons. And now they don't do it properly, by the way, and I'm not sure how it worked in the 1800s in the Britain, but you need three master masons to open a lodge. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
okay. Yeah.
So they only have two, and so they
So
were
they're
like,
running on like the Sith system, and it goes real
yeah, right.
bad when you have the Sith system of just master and apprentice. That's it, right? Like, I don't
Yep,
know.
yep.
Yeah.
Because you're supposed to have master, senior warden, junior warden. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And he
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
calls out, and the reason why I say that, he calls out, okay, he sat in the east in the master's chair, which by the way, and this is what's kind of funny, right? Is that seems like these guys, like they're rock. He points out that there's some sort of Masonic symbol that none of them knew what it was.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, this is a Mason symbol. So, it's one of those things where it almost alludes to like some dumb masons have tried to do this before,
Oh
and the
yeah.
last
Right.
wave of masons only made them fellow crafts, right? But now we made them masters of the craft, right?
Right, because the Masonic symbols do produce an effect in the natives, right? Like they
Correct.
recognize, like, what is it, the
Yes.
apron, right? Like they recognize the
Hmm.
apron, right? Or
Hmm.
some, yeah, to a
Hmm.
certain
Hmm.
extent, right? Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not sure about the details of the British system at this point, because they were like, oh, we need to make different aprons for the different degrees. And this might be a difference between British masonry and American masonry, right? But I don't think so. And the reason why is that, I mean, there is like minor variation between how British masters of the lodge, specifically, not just master masons, right, but masters of the lodge, um, have an apron, right? Because Americans, like, anyway, it's a bunch of minutia, basically, right? It kind of isn't all that super interesting, but essentially, like, British style masons have uh, basically different aprons than American style masons, more or less, right? The Americans are a little bit more toned down, right? Classic,
Right. Yeah.
The British are a little bit more like hoity-toity about it. Fair enough. Um, So that's why they make a big deal about like, oh, I made the master apron very special because like, that's the way British still do it nowadays, right? Canadians like they have a different apron set than we do. Anyway, okay, it doesn't matter. It's all to a certain degree. It's a little bit fake and gay, right? Guys talking, oh, my apron is very cool and your apron is less cool. Like, okay, dude, but whatever. Um, Point being is that like, so they improperly set up a Grand Lodge, right? And then they improperly mint a bunch of Masons, right? Like no
Right.
Mason in the entire world would see this as validly minted Master Masons, right? Um, you know, and so it's kind of interesting because they're kind of trying to use the like prestige and the and it's very interesting though. Now I think about it. Sorry, I'm kind of thinking out loud here,
No,
right?
it's fine. Good. Yeah.
Right, right. And it's kind of interesting because these dudes would have already sort of been quote unquote masonically shaped most of the way by being entered apprentices. And it is kind of funny that like, you know, the third degree has some extra bits that the other two degrees kind of don't, generally speaking, right? And so it is interesting that they kind of elude that, right? Where where Kipling is very funny on these points, basically. Anyway, the point being is that so they illicitly create a Grand Lodge, they illicitly mint a whole bunch of Master Masons, and then they
Yeah.
hold lodge, and they point out like we tried to make it as regular as possible. We even painted the checkerboard floor, and like we had a big stone and little stones and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, man, but like where's your tapers and where's your volume of sacred law? And like, come on, man, like top. You know what I mean? Like this is not a he kind of to the broader point of the story, right? They half-ass it, right?
Right.
For lack of a better term. And
Yeah.
so that is the kind of like that's kind of the message to Freemasons, which is the same message everybody else, which is like you can't half-ass power, right?
Right.
Don't do it, right? Don't
Well,
don't try to leverage power in a half-assed way, whether it's spiritual or ritual or material.
yeah. Well, and when they bring out some of the Masonic symbols, they're recognized, and so the natives think that they're the Kafiristan people. I guess they're
Hmm.
probably Nuristanis if we were to try to place them, pretend, in like a real group of people. Think of them as sort of as divine figures, and then it's figured out that they're actually not, and then like just the horrific shit happens to them, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Dravitt's killed horribly.
Well,
Carnahan
because they
is
get the
almost horribly
they,
killed and then makes it back to where he started. So
well, because it's really interesting
before he dies,
because
he's carrying Dravitt's head. The head has a crown on it, and interestingly, at the very end, to really spoil it, so make
Mhm.
sure you read it. Um, the crown is lost. Like the crown is just gone. Like the crown that he had is just disappeared. Somebody probably just jacks it right off the street, right off his dead body as he dies on the street. Um, going out in the midday sun and having sunstroke. It's interesting. So the crown itself is lost at the end of the story, which I do think is very poetic. That the
no,
crown
it's very
they took,
poetic.
it doesn't just cost them dearly, but like the crown itself then is disappeared because it was never a proper crown, right? It was never like
It never
properly
belonged to
constituted.
them,
Yeah.
right?
I,
Yeah.
I can't help but
Well,
think. So again, I don't know anything
mhm.
about
Yeah, yeah.
masonry,
Go
but
ahead.
as a
Go ahead.
non-mason, I do know that there's particularly in the British incarnation, the English
Yeah,
incarnation of it. There's an Arthurian connection, right? Like there's at least a playing around with Arthurian like symbols, and this idea, I think, in a way of like the illicit crown will disappear. It just strikes me as very like Arthurian, like that the crown that was taken improperly just goes away. Like, and it's
oh
like you don't
yeah.
get to have the crown anymore. Nobody knows where it is anymore. It's just disappeared because it's not there's been too many like crimes against proper kingship, so like you don't get to have a crown. It's just gone. No one knows where it went. Um, it's
Well,
interesting.
because it's
Yeah,
very interesting, right? Because one of the key themes I picked up on was that the natives were very upset about the marriage, right?
right. Yeah.
Which I wanted to get your take on as the more literary slash Kipling guy, right? Because
Well, I
Mace,
mean, I've read Kim and loved it. So like, I guess that's like, I don't know if that makes me a Kipling expert, but
oh,
hit me with
okay,
it.
maybe
Hit,
not.
hit me
Yeah,
with it.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, hit me with. I
No,
can
no.
give you
So
my best
so
gut
so
take. Yeah.
so so basically, the issue kind of ends up being, and this is the big theme, is that they they basically tried to play it both ways, right? And this is again one of the critical things that people miss about the mystery of masonry, right? And mystery in general, right? Is that mysteries are only mysterious, right, if they remain mystical, right? But as
Yeah.
soon as you like reveal the mystery, it's no longer mysterious,
Well,
right?
as
It's
soon as you,
known.
and I mean, in my context, I would say as soon as you quote unquote reveal the mystery, you're left with Evangeli. Here's some grape juice and crackers in the corner, and
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
Eucharist, right? Which
Hmm.
is not
Hmm. Hmm.
Eucharist, right?
And then all of
And
a
then,
sudden, you're
yeah,
just a guy, we're just guys, we're all just guys, right? So if you're
yeah,
gonna like continue to be powerful, right? One of the things is that they raised all of the priest class to the sublime degree of master mason, right? And then they're surprised. And what is the first thing that all these dudes do? Is they start scheming against them because
right,
at that point, right, they're all equal within masonry, right? Like they might
right.
be the grand master, right, of that lodge, but they don't care about that, right? You know, they recognize it just as fake as the guys wearing it, right? And the other kind of interesting thing is too is that I reckon that the whole point is like everybody is willing to entertain one generation of a kooky king, right?
Yeah.
But try to make it a dynasty, and all of a sudden you better have deep roots there,
Well,
right?
and I'm glad you naturally just brought it to that because that's what also what I think why I wanted you to read this is because it has a lot to do with it's a meditation on power and
Hmm.
and improperly constituted and instituted power and
Hmm.
what happens when people who are not virtuous want to become king. I mean, this is a tale as old as
Hmm.
time. I mean, it goes back to the garden. If we want to be kings of ourselves and we're not virtuous enough, we take it and it goes poorly, right? This is just it's all downstream from the fall, really.
Hmm.
In throughout
Hmm.
throughout let's say quote unquote recorded history, whatever that means, you have so many stories of this. You have it in mythic time, you have it in sort of recorded time. This is it's such an old story too, which Kipling would have 100% known, right? Very well read. He would have known this and
Yeah.
is clearly playing with this trope, which is fun. I think it's cool that he, as a British Mason is willing to call out British Masons who are maybe not doing things properly. I mean,
Correct.
I think that he's willing to kind of comment on his own side, which if you've
Yeah.
read any of Kipling, Kipling is seen as this like, I don't know, I guess he has kind of like a complicated history. I think he's great. I love Kipling. Um, but Kipling was critical of British, I think he wanted the British Raj to be the best it could be. Um, I think that he was critical of things that the British were doing in India. I think because he loved the British Empire and loved India. I think he was capable of this, and he does this several
Hmm.
times in his other stories, particularly his longer novels and stuff like that. I'm thinking specifically of Kim is full of this, where a lot of times he's poking fun at Brits who do not understand culture, the local culture, are not really virtuous in and of themselves enough to be maybe in the
Hmm.
stations where they're at. Maybe they've purchased their way up through, to make some small spoilers for Kim, purchased their way up through military ranks, like they've bought their rank, and so they don't really understand. Like they were never fit to lead Englishmen, so they're really not fit to lead any native, or make any decisions for native Indians. I mean, again, he's a colonial guy, but he's not like, England is or Britain is automatically the best at everything. He wants it to be great again. He wants it to become great. And I do see that again. In the intervening years, since the last time I read this story, I actually read Kim, and then reading this again, I was like, oh yeah, that whole thing of like Kipling is actually pretty critical of some like, why are we just willy-nilly handing out rifles? Why are we just arming groups of people and not really training groups of people? Right? There's a whole thing with the martini rifles as sort of a whole plot device, right? Well, we just have all these rifles so it'll work out because we got all these guns, but you're not training people, you're not making sure they're loyal to you. They don't even understand what you're
Actually,
doing. You're just handing guns to people, right?
so
Like all this
there's
stuff. Yeah.
there's a small thing that actually this okay, so this is the reason why why you had me on, right? It's the insight is this insight right here, which is
Well, I only have
it
the
is
exoteric. You have the esoteric. So,
exactly. It is very, very important and meaningful that when he opens Lodge the first time, he he opens Lodge by banging the butt of his rifle. And this is wildly significant to normies, right? But it's extra significant to Masons because the tool you are supposed to open Lodge up with is the common gavel, right? And the common gavel is essentially something meant to this is brilliant, to break stones and make them a perfect dash, essentially like a cubic stone that you could then, or cuboid, right,
Right.
stone, and so that you could build with it, essentially, right?
Right.
And so that's supposed to be the tool by which you open and close the lodge, right? Is that gavel, the one that essentially makes you virtuous, is the important thing, right? And it's something that comes up really early on in the Masonic degrees, right? And so literally all Masons know this, essentially, right? So it's super important that he is opening lodge with the butt of a gun and not a destructive tool, and not the constructive tool and the tool
Right.
of virtue,
Yeah.
right? Like, and this is essentially this whole story, again, esoterically, exoterically, they have the same message, I promise, right? Which is, hey, virtue gained by just sort of being a two-bit thug and going and trying to be a two-bit thug on somebody else's neighborhood is not going to work out, dude. You still have to have the virtues, right? And you can only con your way into being everybody believing that you're a god when you're not, for so long.
Well, yeah, and I mean this is seen by like Dravit wants to break the contract and start marrying local women, but essentially they've set themselves up as maybe god kings, but really what they are is they're priest kings. And
Yeah.
but he's like already reneging. Well, he never had virtuous intent in the first place because he's also idolatrous, right? He wants to become an idol, right? He wants to become a god, but he can't even keep it in the pants long enough to
Well, they
even become a, like it's all just slapdash. The whole thing is slapdash, right? It's all
Well, actually, that is
game.
funny because you say breaking the contract. Literally, there was a contract that was slapdash,
Well,
right? Like
yeah,
they're like,
they
see,
wrote it
we have a
down. Yeah,
contract,
yeah, they wrote it down like in the back of a note paper or something like that,
and
and
they're
it's
like,
misspelled. It's wonderfully misspelled. Yeah, yeah.
what
It's
was the other thing? They were like, oh,
no
we're
liquor,
not
and no
gonna have
women until
no no liquor,
became
no
kings.
bitches until kings with a Z, right?
Yeah, with a Z.
And
Yeah, yeah.
right,
And
and
it's a
yeah, I think
and
he
it's a
started drinking, didn't
it's
he?
a contract and not a contract, which is very funny. Yeah, there's like so
That's
which
great.
tells you something about the education of these gentlemen or not
Right.
gentlemen of these ruffians. So I think that's hilarious. And I also don't know because I'm not a Mason. Would it, I mean, how realistic is that somebody who couldn't even read and write would even have been inducted into the lower levels of Masonry? Don't you have to be, I mean, was that normal to have like less educated people joining, or did you have to have attained a higher, I don't know, right? Like,
Yeah, so actually, that's part of the Masonic brand that anybody from any social class is admissible, and this happens even today, and it was known to happen back then too,
okay,
right?
okay,
Where
yeah,
military lodges are kind of usually the first lodge in a lot of countries, right? So it's a military lodge that's not necessarily attached to a unit officially, but like in terms of jurisdiction for the American military, it's like, hey, there's military lodges around that I'm not exactly sure how they work now I think about it, but they have their own like grand jurisdiction. They're doing their own thing, right? And they can open up and close and do their whole thing, even though they don't have a fixed place of business, if you catch my drift. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
no,
Like,
that makes sense.
so
Yeah,
so 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 it's very like common actually for like an enlisted dude, right? Who is, maybe third year or whatever. I wouldn't say very common, but it happens, and it has happened, and it still happens. Where an enlisted dude, like maybe E3, E4, happens to be the master of the lodge that year, right? And then the colonel walks in, right, and is getting initiated, right, into a. So the notion of the high and the low and everybody being equal within a Masonic lodge is something that happens to this day. And so it's not crazy, it's not impossible. But the warning here, right, is that these guys were master masons, right? In principle, in theory, they should have not been this level of rogue at this point. You
yeah,
feel me? And they
yeah,
should not have been breaking their promises this hard to each other, because both of them are masons, right? So this is the thing, right? Is that they're screwing each other up on like sacred oaths, so to speak, that they've made to themselves, like as individuals and as fellow brother masons, right? So again, like the esoteric and the exoteric are basically the same in terms of like, yo, dude, don't be a rogue. Learn the lessons of like Christendom, essentially, for everybody who's not esoteric, and like, maintain the virtues that you learned in your esoteric orders as well. And don't just kind of throw around the sacred thinking that you're just gonna, it's gonna magically give you everything you want, right? Like, I mean, basically, the if that was in doubt, right? If that is the message of the story, is the doubt. Given the Masonic connection, it's like, absolutely, that's what this story is about. You know what I mean? Like, you actually have to be virtuous, right? You can't
Yep.
just skimp on the virtue. And that's what Britain did. And hilariously, with respect to Afghanistan, that's what America did too.
Yeah, that's
It's
what we did.
very
Yeah.
interesting that
Yeah.
it's in a, yeah.
Yeah. We didn't read it. We didn't read it and learn from it. Yeah, we should have. We should have. Yeah. I thank you, Elliot, for coming on. I adore Kipling. I thank you for letting me force you to read him. Any final thoughts about the story, about the themes, about anything? I don't know.
Oh
Just
no.
final bits.
You can look if you want to really dive into all the relevant Masonic symbols, right? If you're going to do reread through uninitiated then reinitiated, so to speak, you can pick up basically everything. Everything is out there, right, so to speak. Like, you could pick up Freemasonry for Dummies and learn all this stuff. You know what I mean? That's like, there's nothing actually secret happening here. There's, well, like, a little bit of the cultural stuff is what I dealt with right here. You know what I mean? But I mean, that's
Right.
just, look, if you get old enough, every organization has the exact same stuff. You feel me? Right? Like,
Yeah, no, it
politics is
makes sense.
eternal, man. So anyway.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Elliot, for coming on and giving us
Mhm.
at least a Masonic take. Maybe not but a
No,
Masonic
it's a
take on it.
Masonic. Yeah, exactly. Yep, yep.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this inspires you and you, dear listeners, to read Kipling because I think he's great. Uh,
Hmm.
if I can put out a few plugs, and then Elliot, I'll let you do some plugs just so I don't forget.
Sir.
So uh, please, 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 if people are at all interested in anything about secret societies, conspiracy theories, please do check out on the Timeline Earth Patreon. Again, Paz and Bert are running through a long format. I mean, they're going through every single episode of Bill Cooper's Hour of the Time. It's really good. Cooper is kind of crazy, but I mean, maybe every once in a while he's right about something, and it's still fun to listen to. Paz and Bird do a huge amount of research and give good contextual information. I'm enjoy every Sunday that it drops. It makes me happy. It's something to look forward to after church. I walk my dog and listen to it. It makes me incredibly happy. Please check it out. This is designed, of course, to dovetail with that, not just because I'm a fan, but also because me and Paz also cooperate on stuff every month on the Scarlet Thread Society, which is sort of Paz's own sphere of influence, let's say. We do it enchanted office hours. We've talked about human sacrifice last month, which was fun to talk about human sacrifice. Uh,
He got called out for crushing it too hard on TLE. Did you catch that?
yeah,
Where
I caught
Bird
I
was
caught
like,
that too. Yeah,
"Oh,
he's working. He's so
like,
Paz is a great, wonderful Midwestern Lutheran and is very conscientious and hardworking. Me as a Pacific Northwest Anglican but former Lutheran can vibe enough with that. We do stuff once a month. Check us out. All of Paz's stuff is really fun on Scarlet Thread Society. Anything esoteric, woo, spooky. There's a book club. There's like watch parties and stuff. We did a whole thing with Twin Peaks, which was fun. So check it out. Obviously, this is in a way kind of a plug for that, but also it's a way to get Elliot back on the show. And I did
mhm,
generally want to get a Masonic take on this because I'm not a Mason, and I just
yeah,
wanted to know
yeah."
what was because I knew that there was stuff going on under the covers, so to speak, under this behind the scenes of the story. There was a subtext that I wasn't totally getting. Everyone check out Kipling. If I can't put it up on YouTube here because my channel will get axed, but if you want to see something hilarious, check out Kipling's signature. There is his signature with a certain symbol of luck from India that would
Oh
trigger
goodness.
absolutely everyone. It's very fun. I would put it as the thumbnail image, but don't.
Yeah, I mean,
I've
definitely
worked
get
too hard
banned.
at this
You get
channel to do
instant
that.
banned.
Check it out. Yeah, and
It's such
again,
a shame that the Germans had. You know what? The Germans ruin every. I
the
swear,
Germans
like,
really have
Germans,
ruined a
man.
lot of things. They really have. This is why we can't have nice things.
They,
And
they ruined Woo. Like, okay, okay, okay. Just to be clear, like the Bavarian Illuminati, right? Okay. English Freemasonry, Bavarian Illuminati, English Freemasonry,
Yeah,
right?
very very
Like
different.
one of these things is not like the other, and it's the freaking Germans ruining everything that's good and wholesome about England. Amen. God bless America.
Pretty much, yeah. God bless America. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, yeah, everyone, whenever this drops, have a good day, weekend, whenever it drops. Again, I'll link to the story. The story is obviously in public domain. I'll link to a pretty good audiobook reading on YouTube here to it as well. And again, I will also link to information about the movie. Check out the movie. It's very well done. It's a very good film.
I'm
I
gonna
really
watch it. I'm
love it.
looking forward to
Yeah,
it.
it's a good one. Elliot, any shout outs you want to do before we say goodbye? Anything you want to put out there to let people know about, or you don't have to? I try to give
Um,
guests that option.
No, no, there's nothing at the moment. If you're plugged into the circles, I'm not 100% sure if it's actually going to happen or not yet. But I have, and again, it's from a place of love, and naturally, I do recognize that Masons are hella sus, right? Because we're running around building random countries and everything, and generally appearing to be kind of sus occasionally. So fair enough, right? But there's been enough like technical detail things that I'm just like you don't even have to be a Mason. You're like, this is just wrong, right? This is
You
just
mean you
objectively
mean in
incorrect.
particular related to the Bill Cooper series?
With the Bill
Yeah,
Cooper series,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
other
yeah.
stuff when people are just sort of blasé saying, "Oh, high level Masons like 32nd or 33rd," right? And I'm like, okay, this is the equivalent, right? And again, I don't use it's just because people are more familiar with the religious terminology. It's equivalent to saying, "Oh, high level church members, like a local parish bishop and the apostolic nuncio from Rome." And it's like, no, these are wildly different ranks, man. Right?
Right.
Like these are
Yeah.
completely different. And I'm not saying like they both don't have like whatever. It's just like actually it's really closer to like your parish priest versus an apostolic nuncio. It's like not even comparable. It's like, bro, please do the research. Like, yes, there are Masons who have done sketchy stuff, like the dude who nuked Japan. It's a Freemason, right? So fair enough, right? But like, but he was one of the last presidential Freemasons, right? So that should kind of tell you something, right? Like, pay attention to the skull and bones, right? They're a little bit more interesting than we are right now. So, anyhow,
Yeah. Yeah, for real, for real. Particularly as it pertains to a certain president and Afghanistan. So
just
the
saying.
rabbit hole really does go everywhere.
We've been well, what I'm saying is like we've been look we had power for a long time, and insofar as we have it, we don't got it anymore. I'll tell you that right now. Like,
Fair
like,
enough.
but there you go. So
Fair
we'll
enough.
we'll see if that ends up coming to pass. So you might get a little bit of technical detail sort of
Cool.
correction there. So
That would be cool. Yeah, well, for the sake of your mother and for mine, thank you, there, Elliot.
hey man, hey man.
I'll let you go. Everyone, yeah, I don't know how much it helps the really, but if you would please like and subscribe. I'm assuming a lot of you probably might be getting this via a cross posting with Pause. He's usually pretty generous and reposts my stuff on Twitter. But if you're encountering us for the first time, check out our back catalog. Elliot's been on quite a bit. I am going to try to start doing more episodes now into the summer, and having some former guests back on. So we're not giving up. We've just slowed down, but hopefully we'll increase. All right, enough hums and haws. Don't go and become kings unless you are virtuous. That's what I'll leave you with.
Hmm.
And remember that you
Hmm.
are not a god. That's very
Yeah.
important too.
Who you
Amen.
are or what esoteric orders you taken, you still ain't a god.
You ain't a god. Yeah. All right. Peace, everyone. Catch you later.